Hello, I'm standing at the west end of the York Beltline Trail, a linear park that forms part of a park system in Toronto. Come along with me, we'll explore the trail and cover some history. The York Beltline Trail is one of three parts of the Beltline Trail, which runs about 9 kilometers through Toronto. And as you might have guessed from the paving stones, this is a rail trail. This is originally, all three of them are part of the Dawn Loop of the Toronto Beltline Railway Company. About 20 meters behind me is the GO Transit Barrie line, and around 100 meters or so that way is where this line would have merged into that for the trip down to Union Station. Now, it's 9 kilometers long, so there's a lot of walking ahead. So let's get started. The Toronto Beltline Railway Company was founded in 1889, along with its sister company, the Toronto Belt Land Company, a land developer. The railway was intended to attract customers to buy homes on the land by providing a convenient way to commute between home and work. There were two separate loops. This is the Dawn Loop, measuring about 27 kilometers. The other loop was the Humber Loop to the west. The real estate boom ended and railway construction costs were high. The railway went bankrupt in early 1892, and the line was acquired by the Grand Trunk Railway. No, not the band, that's the Grand Funk Railway. The Beltline Railway had an agreement to use Grand Trunk's lines for part of the loop anyway, including today's Barrie GO train line, originally built by the Ontario, Simcoe and Huron Railway in 1853, which was then acquired by the Northern Railway of Canada in 1858, and subsequently by the Grand Trunk in 1888. Grand Trunk finished the line and opened it in July 1892. The line closed in November 1894, less than 2.5 years after it opened. High fares, low ridership, an economic downturn, and competition from streetcars and radial railway lines made it uneconomic. The first intersection we reach is Caledonia Road. You can see we have another of these rail patterns. They have these on the York Trail at each intersection. And like many intersections on this trail, there is no official crossing here. So you either have to play chicken and run across the street or jog off the trail to the nearest signalized intersection. Let's cross the road and keep going. From the west end of the trail, the character of the neighborhood has largely been industrial, but as we've been approaching Dufferin Street, it's changed, and now for the next few kilometers, it's mostly residential on both sides. And we're going to cross Dufferin Street on this bridge. This is an original bridge, and here's a photo of it from the street level. Very nice. So let's continue walking east. In 1906, a section of the unused line in the Don Valley was acquired by the Canadian Northern Railway to become part of its main line north from Toronto. The magic link above goes to my previous video in which we saw another part of the Canadian Northern's line, and I'll leave a link in the description below as well. In 1910, Grand Trunk rebuilt the section from our starting point to Mount Pleasant Road for use as a freight line. During World War I, the tracks in the Moore Park Ravine were pulled up to be used as scrap iron. We'll visit that part of the line later in this video. Grand Trunk pretty much went bankrupt in 1919 and was taken over by the federal government, which placed it under the control of the Canadian National Railway in 1920, and after a few years of legal wrangling, CN completely absorbed Grand Trunk in 1923. As we approach Marlee Avenue, we come to a gap in the trail. Construction of the Allen Road, also known as the Spadina Expressway, severed this rail line, leaving the eastern portion completely isolated. To continue along the trail, we have to go half a block either north or south to the nearest streets that cross over the Allen Road. So let's do that, and I'll meet you on the other side.
In a way, the loss of one railway line led to the construction of another. In the middle of Allen Road, we have an extension to the Toronto subway system. This northbound train has just left the Eglinton West station. We are now immediately east of the expressway. You can see the noise barrier wall on my right. And here we are at the start of the Gardner Beltline Park, the central section of the Beltline Trail, named after a former Toronto City Councillor whose advocacy for this park was a major factor in getting it built.
After the construction of the Allen severed the rail line, CN continued using the western portion as an industrial spur. There was much debate about what to do with the eastern part, but in 1972 the City of Toronto bought it with the intention of turning it into a trail. In 1988, the city also bought the western portion that we saw in the first part of this video. Even at that point, it had been almost a century since this was a passenger line, and all of the Beltline stations are long gone.
As we approach Eglinton Avenue, we reach the site of the Eglinton station on the Beltline. This commemorative installation was put up by the city just last year to mark the location. As we continue on, just on the other side of this bridge is the location of the Chaplin station on the Eglinton Crosstown LRT line, which was supposed to open this year but has now been indefinitely postponed. There's also some rather positive looking graffiti. As we approach Yonge Street, we reach the TTC's Davisville subway yard. This was the first subway yard built for the original Yonge line, which opened in 1954. And somewhere around the point where I'm standing, a siding came off this railroad line going into the TTC yard, and that's how the original TTC subway trains were delivered to the yard. Now, the trains had to be brought in on railroad vehicles. They couldn't be brought in directly on the railroad itself because the TTC subway, like the TTC streetcars, uses a non-standard track gauge. That's the distance between the rails. It's a couple of inches larger than standard gauge, so those vehicles would not work on regular railroad tracks.
This is the bridge over Davisville Yard and Yonge Street. It gives a nice view of the yard. To the south,
I don't think so. So, but I couldn't come anyway, it was out of town.
and to the north.
Oh.
And because it also spans the subway line itself, you can watch the trains go by. There's public artwork in the form of horse statues on the section crossing Yonge Street. And you can get a nice view of the street. Here's what the bridge looks like seen from the street below.
As we approach Mount Pleasant Road, we reach this mural, which commemorates a former landmark at this location, the silos of the Dominion Coal and Wood Company, which had been served by this rail line. These days, they've been replaced by a condo building. From Yonge Street up to this point, the path has been running along the north side of Mount Pleasant Cemetery. Now, we follow the path of the rail line which turned south to southeast through the cemetery for the next little way. As we leave the cemetery, we reach Moore Avenue. On the other side of Moore Avenue is the third portion of the trail, the Ravine Beltline Trail. However, as you can see, this part of it is closed for construction, so we'll have to skip a little bit farther down the trail and continue from there. We're at the Cat's Eye Bridge, also known as the Heath Street Bridge because it follows the original alignment of Heath Street. This is 1 block south of Moore Avenue, and at this point we can go back down into the valley and get on the Ravine Beltline Trail.
It's not just the footpath that has a steep slope. Down in Moore Park Ravine itself, there was a section of the rail line with about a 4% grade, which is very steep by railroad standards. There's a link between Moore Avenue, Moore Park, and the Beltline Railway. John Thomas Moore was a land developer in this area and was also involved with the railway. This is the ravine of Mud Creek, one of Toronto's many lost rivers. Here's a list of some others. Mud Creek originally arose in the area of Downsview Airport, running generally southeast toward the Don Valley. The section in this ravine is the only part that hasn't been buried. Even here, its course is not entirely natural, and it travels through culverts in a few spots. Looking up from this culvert, we see this bridge. It may look somewhat delicate, but this carries the CP North Toronto subdivision, CP's main line across Midtown Toronto. The North Toronto sub made an appearance early in my video on the West Toronto Rail Path, which you can find with the magic link above or in the description below. Just past the railroad bridge, we find another bridge. This is the Governor's Road Bridge.
Just a short walk past the Governor's Road Bridge, we come to a fork in the trail. To the left is a path leading to the Don Valley Brickworks, a really interesting adaptive reuse of a brick factory. But we're going to continue on to the right, following the Ravine Beltline Trail. Much of the Gardner Beltline Park and the Ravine Beltline Trail have been heavily shaded by the tree canopy. But here, just a little past the last location, we come out into the open and get some sunshine for a little while. The final part of the trail runs alongside Bayview Avenue in the area of the Bayview and Bloor ramps to and from the Don Valley Parkway. And as we emerge into this small clearing, we are reaching the end of the Ravine Beltline Trail and the end of our trip for today. I hope you've enjoyed our little journey along this rail trail. Please like and subscribe and maybe check out some of my other rail trail videos.